Be agreed to. I call Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's good to follow on in this debate, and I want to respond to some of the things that the Minister has said about this Land Transport Amendment Bill. Labor is supporting this bill, sir, as we have supported bills that have included these measures going right back to 2009. And I'm going to talk more about the specific provisions in the bill and why we support them, but I think it is worth taking a minute or two just to reflect on the provenance of this bill. The Honourable Jerry Brownlee talked about how the government has been considering all of the research, the international research about lowering the alcohol limits and weighing up the research before it proceeded with this bill. Well, in my humble opinion, sir, the research that actually informed this bill was Ian Lees-Galloway's private members bill being pulled from the ballot. That is the thing that spurred the Minister into action. It was the prospect of Ian Lees-Galloway's bill that would have lowered the limits in exactly the same way that this bill does. The prospect of that bill gaining majority support in this House would have been a political embarrassment for the government. And we've seen for 5 years since Darren Hughes's bill in 2009, which would have had pretty much the same effect as this, we've seen prevarication by this government for 5 years, not checking the research in Australia or the US, anywhere else around the world. Actually, the reason that this government didn't progress this issue for those 5 long years is that they didn't want to be seen as nanny state. And Stephen Joyce was so concerned about the optics of actually lowering the alcohol blood limits and the thresholds that are contained in this bill that they weren't prepared to entertain the prospect of lowering the limits. And that says a lot about this government. Stephen Joyce, I think himself, said publicly that you could drink, I think it was 3/4 of a bottle of wine, and still, under the current law, still be able to legally get behind the wheel. So to say that publicly and then for 5 long years not actually proceed with this long overdue reform, I think it says a lot. So it's not at all about the international research. It was simply about Ian Lees-Galloway's members bill being pulled out of the ballot. That's why the government brought this to the House, and finally squeaking it through in the dying hours of this parliamentary term, sir. A pretty half-hearted effort, you'd have to say. So the purpose of this bill, just to recap, is to address the problem of drink driving with a number of amendments, including lowering the adult legal alcohol limit from 400 micrograms of alcohol per litre of breath to 250, so from 400 down to 250 micrograms for a breath test, and from 80 milligrams of alcohol per 100 millilitres of blood to 50 milligrams, so from 80 to 50 for a blood test. And that will, without a doubt, make a very significant difference. And as the Minister pointed out, the data shows that there is an exponential increase in fatalities and casualties on the road from drink driving, from a modest but steady increase in alcohol consumption of those people who get behind the wheel. So it makes a lot of sense, we believe, to lower the limits in this way. It will make a really significant difference to the carnage on the roads. And there's some very interesting statistics about the cost of drink driving. It's one of the major causes of road accidents in New Zealand. An average, according to the MOT, an annual average of 61 fatalities, 244 serious injuries, and 761 minor injuries every year. That's an extraordinary roll call of social harm and the disruption and the loss that people face, people and families all over this country, caused by drink driving. The economists have calculated that the financial cost of these injuries and fatalities is $446 million. That's every year the cost of drink driving. That is a massive cost to the country. And what the officials advised was that lowering the legal alcohol blood limit in the way that this bill does will save on average 3.4 lives every year. 3.4 lives saved every year. Now imagine if in 2009, if Darren Hughes's bill had been supported in this House, had been pulled from the ballot and supported, 3.4 lives could have been saved every year for the last 5 years. And sir, that is the cost of delay and prevarication that we have seen. So the other savings, this bill should, according to the projections, save on average 64 injury-causing crashes from happening and $200 million in social costs of the fatalities and casualties over a 10-year period. So that's a massive cost-benefit gain from that we should see from the passage of this legislation. One of the interesting things about this bill, and I know that it was debated at Select Committee at length, is that the government chose with this bill to, rather than just lowering the blood alcohol and breath limits, they've chosen to set up a civil infringement regime for offences that fall between the old limits and the new limits. And call me thick, but actually I have yet to hear in the previous debates, and including in the committee stages when we repeatedly asked the Minister and the Chair to get up and take a call, and I really didn't find the Minister's explanation of the justification of the civil infringement regime in his contribution. I didn't find that a very clear or compelling explanation about why. And he said, well, I think his words were, he said, you know, $250 fine and the number of demerits that you would get, that is not the soft option, he said. Well, to be frank, Mr. Speaker, that it is the soft option. By definition, it is the soft option. And so what this bill does is that it sets up a hierarchy between the criminal offences that exist within from zero to the old limits, and a civil infringement regime between the old limits and the new limits. It clearly is the soft option, and I'm not sure why, and well, I'd be interested to hear from the members opposite another attempt at an explanation as to why they've gone down this track. It clearly sets up a two-tier infringement system, and it's not clear to me why the government would want to do that, sir. So there's no doubt that really in our adult lifetimes there's been a massive social change on the question of drink driving. And as the Minister himself said, public attitudes now are far, far less tolerant of people who want to drink and drive. And I think there's an acceptance of the point that he made that the general view now is that by all means, you know, get drunk in your own home, go to a bar, go to a club or a restaurant, whatever, but it's no longer your God-given right to get behind the wheel and subject everybody else to the appalling risks that drunk drivers pose on our roads. And I want to pay tribute to all of the work that's been done by people, by public health workers, by public servants working in the ministries and departments, the people who've done all of the work, all of the host responsibility work, the school teachers. There's been a tide of change on public attitudes on this case and on this issue, and it's had a very, very positive effect. And I think that people like the Drug Foundation, for example, who have endorsed this bill strongly, I think quite rightly say that this will have a really positive effect in terms of reducing the harm caused by drink driving.
I call David Bennett.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and it's a shame that member had to drone on for 10 minutes, and it's pretty effective of the Labor Party and what they actually did in this area.